It's owl power time. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Noctua NF A14x25 G2, second generation. Let's go to it. First, a little bit of spec information about this cute little owl. 25 millimeters thick, SSO2 bearing, 19 amps. It's a little bit on the high side, but not ridiculous. You could still run plenty of fans off of one fan header, meaning 3. 0 to 1,500 RPM, there's that, and a 6-year warranty, and of course Noctua's reputation. First test is the case simulation test. For you, the viewer, how can you use it? Well, depending on what size computer case you're going to be buying, using, building into, is what data point you want to focus in on. So the 6-inch mark is your small form factor cases, assuming a front-to-back airflow type design. It would basically be no GPU inside the case. The 6-inch mark is also representative of putting fans in the floor of your case and having them blow up towards your GPU. Then the 9-inch mark would be a compact tower. Think a case that can barely fit a standard ATX motherboard, not a lot of extra room in front where the fans go, but it would still be able to fit fans there, and the GPU would be the length of the motherboard, so very compact. The 11-inch mark would be your standard mid-tower cases, a lot like this picture right here. 320 millimeter class fans in its length, or a standard 360 AIO, and the 14.5-inch mark is your truly large tower, something like the Fractal Design Torrent full-size case, where it's 340 millimeter class fans. Now, first test is comparing against something, and that is my standardized control fan. It is based 3 parts A12x25 to 1 part original A14. Very good fans at the time that I started doing this testing, and it's what I consider a baseline for what I call a good fan. So how do these compare? Well, the G2 is beating out my control fan at bigger cases, which makes a lot of sense. 140 millimeter class fans generally do better at the 11 and 14.5-inch mark than 120 millimeter class fans. And it's beating out the original A14 by a pretty significant margin, so that is a great result. At 100% PW fan ceiling, well, the G2 is once again beating out the field. It ends up at approximately the same place in bigger cases as the original A14, but overall it's doing an excellent job and would be considered a good, very good case fan based solely on this. But how does it compare against other case fans? Well, on here are among the top rated fans I have tested, as well as some other ones, and it's doing fairly well. It isn't quite at that tippy top in my 11 decibel noise normalized readings, but it's certainly in a very good position overall across all of its data points. And taking a look at it in bar graph form, again, holding up very nicely, sitting right in the upper middle of the pack in these upper echelon fans. So it's doing really quite well. Next, a brand new graph, taking a look at things at an 18 decibel mark, and how does it compare? And it's riding up there among the best fans. It's on the lower side of the best fans, but it's still there. There are no real poor performers here, so it's not quite at that very best of the best category, but it's certainly in that top echelon of fans. Taking a look again in bar graph form, same sort of thing I just iterated. It's doing really well. It's an impressive fan. Next, at 100% PWM fan ceiling, well, RPM here matters, and a lot of these other fans do have higher RPM. Now, what is remarkable here is that it's only spinning at 1,500 RPM. A lot of these other fans, so we have the 3,000 RPM A14 right here. The Iceberg Thermal Extra is also almost a 3,000 RPM fan. The Tough Fan 14 Pro is like a 2,000 RPM fan. And how close this 1,500 RPM fan is to those is remarkable. So much respect for the engineering that went into it. And I'm not just like Noctua fanboy. I do like Noctua fans, but you know, the engineering effort to optimize a fan is a great amount of effort. So now I've got a couple new graphs. So I've normalized to RPM, and these are ranked based off of the calculation over here. So the A14 is the best, followed by the A14 A14x25G2 with its noise level, so it is quieter and it's moving slightly more air at the 6 and the 11 inch mark. Again, the values are based off of an average of the 6, the 9, the 11, and the 14.5 inch mark. So the A14 may do better at some of the data points, just not listed in my graph form. And right after the A14 is the Tough Fan 14 Pro, which is ironically going a little bit quieter, but not moving quite as much air. And you can see a bunch of other fans. And then way down here, a little bit lower, is the original A14. The A14 original does hold up remarkably well considering how old the fan is. So if you have one of those and it's running well, I see no reason to replace it. Next, new data point is at 1,500 RPM, and the A14X2G2 25G2 is ranked in first place. And I think I forgot to mention this. Any fans that you see this bracket on, or an and I was playing around with different settings to try to make the graphs look a little bit neater, are fans that I've started testing in my new house. With the new carpet, it's the same test equipment, but the carpet is different in the new house versus my old one. And the room environment, the room shape's different. So the noise levels are slightly different, and I have applied factor. It means that I have about a 1 decibel error in the calculation, where it's, I personally think, probably 1 decibel too high. If I take away the correction factor, it's like 2 decibels with how I was reading. I got it to where I personally feel like it's functionally equivalent, and I based it off of a couple different fans. I ran them through my test suite just to normalize it, and it looks pretty good. So I'm have pretty high confidence level in it with regard to that. So I did put the bracket on just to denote any new fans I'll be testing will have that bracket system on it, indicating that it's tested in a new environment. So take it with a little bit more grain of salt, and I would like to. It's just where I am with my testing. So now we're on to decibels versus airspeed at the 9 inch mark. And the G2 is, again, it's doing really well. It's not in that top echelon area, but it's certainly a very good fan, which is what we're taking a look at. And here is the original A14, meeting it fairly closely. And one note here is the original actually doesn't get quite as loud, but it isn't moving quite as much air either. And taking a look at the noise levels in a different style is in Sone. So Sone helps exaggerate higher noise levels, while decibels helps exaggerate lower noise levels. So decibels, every 10 decibels is a doubling in noise volume. So from 0 to 10 is 10 decibels. So it's double the noise as you get here. But as you keep going up, it doubles. Sone doesn't do that. It's a linear system, so it helps stretch it out. I have a whole piece on my channel if you're really interested in it. The nuances, I can't remember off the top of my head. But there we go. %. Now we're looking at performance of a CPU air cooler in meters per second. I am trying to save up for a test system. If you like what I'm doing with this channel, I would ask that you think about joining me as a YouTube member or as a Patreon, or think about sending me a super, because that money literally is going into saving up to build a test system to do the thermal testing for this channel. But until then, I'm stuck with just measuring airspeed through the coolers. And airspeeds that I find through the air cooler, the Noctua U12A, and the Black Ice Nemesis 140 GTX are functionally equivalent, and I'll have a graph showing that a little bit later on. So I've just kind of condensed it in that form factor for right now. So the first graph here on the left side is meters per second versus RPM, and this is basically a blade efficiency graph. It's how much air can this fan move at a given RPM. And the G2 is flipping awesome. It is blowing away the control fan and the original A14. If we take a look at the right graph here, it's airspeed versus noise in decibels. And the control fan is beating out both of these two fans. So can't win them all, but the new fan, the G2, is beating out the original A14. Now this is the graph that I mentioned. The blue is the U12A, the red is the Black Ice Nemesis or radiator, and you can see that they line up very, very closely. This doesn't mean that a heatsink will have the same cooling potential as a radiator. It means that the resistance of air traveling through it is functionally equivalent. This ignores thermal mass and everything else like that. It is just airflow going through it, okay? Don't bite my head off. Here we are, noise normalized values. The blue line is 11 decibels. The red is my new 18 decibel noise normalized value. It is scaled off of the 11 decibel mark because I consider silence a little bit more important than that slightly higher noise level at 18 decibels. And the G2 is ranked towards the top. There are plenty of fans, better than it, but it's also beating out the original A14, even if it's ever so slightly. But it is beating out a bunch of other really quite good fans. Taking a look at things at my new 800 RPM normalized values, and these rankings are calculated based 3/4 of the ranking is based off of airspeed performance going through it, and 1/4 of the ranking is based off of the noise performance. So that means that if a fan is too noisy for its given airspeed, it may not rank towards the top, even though its airspeed might be quite excellent. It was too noisy, something like that. So at the tippy top, we got the Tough Fan 14 Pro, followed by the Loop FTP. So the G2 is ranked in a very good position. And if you keep going down a little bit further, you get the original A14 also in a very good positioning. And both these two fans are beating out something like the P14. At the normalized value at 1500 RPM, the G2 is ranked in like 4th place. It is doing an excellent job. The Tough Fan 14 Pro is ranked a little bit better than it. And following the G2 is the P14 Max, another fan that I consider quite excellent indeed. And a little bit further down the graph, we have the original A14. Let's see right down here, I'm tracing with my mouse cursor. Jumping things up to 100% PWM fan signaling. And we can see that the G2 is ranked really well. Look at the fans around it. All of them are basically 2000 RPM fans. It's spinning at 1500. Now take a look at the noise levels that most of those fans are. It's generating less noise than them, while generating close to the same airspeed. I mean, 2000 RPM fans tend to outperform it by a good solid bit. But fans that are like 1800 to just barely 2000, it ties or dominates, and it's significantly quieter. So I mean, it's good. And now we're taking a look at decibels versus meters per second. So again, we got the tippy top, very best fans, and we have this other grouping of just good fans. And the G2 sits in that good category. Not the tippy top best, but good. Taking a look at the same thing, but this time in zone. And it's just a different way of taking a look at it. And basically the exact same opinion that I have on this fan. It's not quite at the top echelon, but it's certainly a very good fan. Alright, before I test out the A14 Gen 2, it's got this special cover to protect the fan blades and keep it from spinning. That needs to be removed. I just thought that this was a cool quality of feature for what Noctua does for this fan. Okay, let's take a quick look at the blade, because Noctua's new design is very unique and basically as far as I can tell, first of its kind in terms of this overall blade geometry. First is the gap. I mentioned that a little bit ago. It is incredibly tight between that blade and the frame, especially for a 140 millimeter class fan. Normally you'd only see that sort of distance in 120s. As the blade gets bigger, inertia and materials tend to stretch out more. So it's truly a marvel that Noctua was able to design this. Next, you see Noctua's classic little ridges on the fan blade. This is just there to help direct airflow. And there's another little bonus ridge right there at the end. And that, once again, is just to direct airflow and to try to keep air from coming in, as I'm holding right now, rushing back towards the camera in any high pressure type scenarios. The geometry is, well, Noctua did the analysis. I can only make observations because I don't have CFD software. There to help create a good pressure scenario in doing kind of an all-around type design to create back pressure, to eliminate back pressure near the fan hub, as well as getting good kind of thrust going through it. You got these little shapes. It's geometry on the fan, and it's there to help direct airflow around the central hub. And if we take a look at the back, the struts are nice and thin, and it's got, texture and airflow guidance on the back. On the front, there isn't so much as a step as we see on other Noctua fans. It sits a little bit closer to the front of it, but it still was not loud when we put it up against my heatsink. So Noctua worked their magic once again. Overall, I think that this is a gorgeous fan. I look forward to seeing it in, black or even white in the future. But you know what? I think it still looks good in brown. So one thing Noctua has not done with their newest generation fan is that there's no multi-link connection between one fan and the next. You only get one cable, which means you need Y splitters to connect multiple fans together. I don't know. I kind of have mixed thoughts. It would be nice if there was a Y splitter on it built into the fan, but because it's already such an expensive fan. And it would be nice if Noctua started to develop a linking system to connect multiple of their fans together, because I know a lot of people use these on radiators, but I know that this fan was designed first and foremost for air coolers. So doing something like that might have just driven up cost needlessly for this basic design, but it would be nice to see if Noctua would implement something like that in the future. I guess only time will tell. Now we're taking a look at CFM. CFM is basically a scientific exercise. It's cubic feet per minute. It is a volumetric flow rate. You take a volume of air, how quickly can it move that volume of air? So I blow air down a tube and you get that calculation. It completely negates how effective that fan is at actually blowing air across a distance because of that tube. So in computer cases, CFM really shouldn't be used. Anybody who's saying high CFM good for a case airflow fan doesn't understand case airflow, doesn't understand computational fluid dynamics. I'm an aerospace engineer. Computational fluid dynamics is my specialty. So, I mean, unless I show you my diploma, I guess you're just taking my word for it, but that it is my thing. Anyways, so the G2 is sitting right here, and in this blade efficiency graph on the left side, it is doing, well, better than the control and better than the original A14, which ironically, the A14 is what was used as the control fan in this test. Some slight differences because the A14 is averaged between the A14 IPC and non-IPC versions. Taking a look at noise versus CFM, and the G2 is dominating the control fan. Actually, not quite dominating. It's beating it out, though. And the original A14 is sitting just underneath the control fan, again, for the reasons that I already just described. Taking a look at noise normalized values, the red line is for that 18 decibel mark, while the blue line is for the 11 decibel mark in my noise normalized values, the G2 is ranked in a very high position. Again, you'll see some flip-flop in this 18 decibel mark, but overall, I'd even say at that higher noise level that the G2 is in an excellent position overall. Take a look at 100% PWM fan ceiling. Once again, it is sitting right near top-end fans. It is beating out some fans that spin at over 2,000 RPM. So I don't know what sort of magic Noctua was stuffed into this fan, but I want some of that like everywhere. And once again, taking a look at noise or CFM versus noise levels, and very few fans actually beat it out like completely. It is sitting in a very nice group of fans that have very similar performance characteristics. And now for the last section, this is the value proposition. Value proposition is not performance, it is a performance per dollar. So it's how much performance are you getting for your hard-earned money. And the G2 is a $40 fan, which means its value, unfortunately, is not going to be very good. This calculation ignores things like brand reputation, quality of bearings, RGB, other visual aesthetics, what have you. It only tells you how much performance you're getting for your dollar. So it is up to you to determine what other aspects of a fan are important to you or not important to you when deciding which fan to get. This is just simplified, I guess. CFM value, the G2 is actually pretty good positioning considering how expensive the thing is. So that just is a testament to how good its performance is that it can rank where it does, I guess. And performance for the CPU or cooler, the fact it's not in last place, I consider that a remarkable feat. Again, considering this fan's expensive price tag. And at the end of every video, I do like to show off my raw data. This raw data does belong to me. If you would like to use it for your own personal use, you may go ahead and do so. If you're going to put it into any sort of video, written journal, anything like that, I do ask that you reference me and my channel because it's my hard work. If you like what I'm doing and want to see this channel succeed, I ask that you hit that subscribe button. It really does go a long way. Other than that, and if you have the financial means, I know it's a hard thing to ask, join me as a Patreon or become a YouTube member. It really does go a long way. I can't thank those of you enough who have joined me as Patrons or as YouTube members. It is going a long way in helping me get to that next level. As always, if you've got suggestions on fans you would like me to take a look at in the future, please leave that in the comment section down below. Or if you've got comments on ways I can improve my videos, I'm always trying to improve it. These new tests for at that 800 and 1500, and you see slots for even higher RPM fans, that was a viewer suggestion, as well as adding a higher noise normalized value. So I did a second one. So I do take input and I try to always improve. So with regard to everything else, thank you very much for watching my video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time here on Computer Tech and More.